Hello, everyone. My name is Yuta Jazz, and today we're going to come back to the Occult Saga podcast, where I talk about spiritual practices and actual experience. The stuff I talk about, some of it is because I've been either exposed to certain, people maybe mentioning it or information being given to me through either like videos, the spiritual community, how its movement, is going around in certain years or times. But most of it is really my experience, what I've realized, what I've learned about spirituality and certain practices and certain terms that you might hear about like everything basically, but it is my understanding, and I guess some of it I've experienced with other people, with other psychics that are really tuned in. And I learn and realize more through the experience of not just my own, but through the conversations we have or through what they also experience. Sometimes it lines up, and that is like a key to discovery, even if we have different like conclusions, right, or completely separate experiences, it still can follow some thread or kind of is like I guess a breadcrumb path or a rabbit hole that leads you to certain knowledge and understanding, but you have to go through it to actually realize this stuff. And I've noticed that a lot of people go off on ideas more so than they talk about the reality and the experience behind it after like multiple years of work, right? There's certain things that are held behind initiations in spiritual communities, and there's also many reasons why people don't talk about the stuff I talk about in the way that I talk about, besides me having my own experience. And they have it behind like certain paywalls that aren't that bad, like Patreon and stuff like that, where they have a more personal community that's more tightly knit and is more aligned and in the same vibe, right? Because it's better for practitioners that way. It's easier for everyone in some parts of the spiritual communities that we have. But I guess I just was wanting to share my stuff and experiences. So yeah, longer spiel this time because I actually got a question on Twitch the other day about like I've never heard this concept, right? Like where did it come from? And I'm like I literally got a bit stunned in the moment because I'm like, where did I hear it? And I'm like, I don't think I heard that one anywhere. I think I tuned into it and figured that out myself, I guess, because I like looking at existence from a real big macro scale of like what is consciousness, what's awareness, what is soul, what is source, right? What is God? To what extent does that go? And I really delve deep, and some things I don't need to talk about, but other things I feel like are very interesting and important for us to start opening up because we're evolving to newer and different and higher levels in general, like not just spirituality and the spiritual community, but people in just, I guess you could say like the muggle world, but really just people that don't follow the idea, trend, or practices or whatever it is of spirituality, right? They might be a very wholesome person, they could be very philosophical, like a bunch of other things. So this episode is going to be about astrology, which I've been actually avoiding. That was only the one so far. And the reason I didn't drop an episode last week was because I was kind of stunned in a way. I'm not an astrologer. I don't really divinate through astrology. I don't really work with it too much. But I am very much connected to the shifts in astrology. My chart to me has been the most interesting thing ever, and I have my own understanding or acceptance of it, and it is still evolving. I don't have a conclusion or a specific thought anymore about astrology. I think I did along the way. Maybe I'll just be rambling and channeling some stuff about my experience and where I've been with it. Maybe I'm just gonna share like yeah that and see what I can say about astrology, but it's not like The Matrix, I had a lot of stuff to talk about. But astrology, not so much. It's my interesting little thing that I look at and divinate, but I'm not so heavy on it as like reading tarot, having like practices in telepathy or in-person divination, right? Or reading synchronicities and signs and practicing certain aspects of manifestation. Those things are kind of more interesting to me. Psyche unraveling, deprogramming, the healthy mind prospect, right? Or just in general, like holistic practices that then can go over to spirituality. But astrology, astrology is a thing that I was instantly fascinated with when I saw my chart for the first time. I think I maybe saw something else's chart or someone else's chart. I don't know if it was my chart or not. I can't remember. But I do remember I was just like like out of nowhere. It was one of those weird days where I was going out of the bounds of what I usually watch or search on the internet, and I found some type of chart, and I instantly was like glued into it. I was like, this makes sense, and this has a lot of info and knowledge in it. I just can't understand it. I can't make heads or tails. I didn't even know I was looking at a chart. The only thing I realized is that it is a graph, a scheme of some sort that is spiritual, probably tied to planets or something. I don't know. Maybe there's numerology in there. I have no frickin' clue, but it is relevant and it has a map sort of feeling to it. It's kind of like reading certain statistics. Um, and from there on out, I don't know how long it took me to get into actually understanding that it was an astrological chart. I think it was, I don't know, like maybe 5 or 6. I want to say 5 for some reason. Not that I really remember, because those years of like the first awakenings when I wasn't fully there yet with that were very cloudy in a lot of ways. A lot has happened personally to me in my life with awakening that I just sometimes it's so hard to get a timeline, right? Or a linear idea of what happened after what, when, especially if you have Mandela effects or quantum jump symptoms. But I was 5 months after finding the first chart, we're already generating my own astrology chart, and I was trying to delve into it and realize it. I didn't really quite get there, but I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll read into it at some other point. And I was living with a person that was a Wiccan, and they actually read my chart, and they did a huge job. I was like, you sh this must have taken you hours. And mind you, she would get like a lot of energetic times when she's just delving into the universe and just channeling, zooming in and researching like mad. That's just the type of person she is going through the two extremes, and very kind of her to not ask for anything in return. She just was, I think, happy and excited to see me opening up to spirituality and being at such a ground zero, rational, skeptic position of it, where I was still open in learning and realizing, and I really wanted to figure some stuff out for me personally, for myself, not to necessarily attach to anything I'm seeing outside of myself. So. There were a lot of points that made sense. There were a lot of points that kind of got a hit and miss effect because it was more reading the relation of aspects between them or what they could signify and what they could mean, but not necessarily being perfectly aligned or applied to me. So a lot of stuff did hit, but a lot of the stuff also was either kind of half baked, had like pieces of truth in it, or was aspects that were in my chart, but they didn't relate that way to me. So I was quite interested because I'm like, okay, some of this shows different periods of time of me in extremes. Some of this looks like a spectrum of how a person could be feeling or what they could exhibit in their character, what they could go through, but nothing really is definite. Like some things were more relatable to for the future, for the past. In the present, there wasn't too much as I guess I would have hoped for. I thought maybe something would be more practical and relatable that I really could dig into, and the only thing that I really got is like maybe some driving points or forces on my personality and character. Funnily enough, though, after that, when if I jump way, way, way in the future, when I actually found my first like spiritual group and we dug into everything, um, I learned that some things that I don't even have in my chart are very much a part of my personality. Some things about who I am inherently weren't really as affected by the chart as I thought it would, which was really surprising to me because I still, since I was young, I was hyper interested in zodiac signs, which I find it funny that we also have planets impacting us in astrology, not just the stars and constellations. Um, but yeah, I was like, huh, it's not it's not definite. There's points and pieces to it, and other things really just depend off the person and how they're either like maybe playing with the energies, or there's so many other factors in between of this that like it's it's a vague weather map slash a vague timing clock for you to tune into and tap into to see certain aspects or truths, but really it's something that you read along the way in your life that really starts making more and more sense with time, with exposure, right? With you realizing more truths about personality of your own, yourself in general and whole, right, as a soul, and then details and aspects about the actual approaches and practices behind astrology. I think a lot of it is moving to a new age, and I think some of us are still stuck in reading it in old ways that do not apply to us no more. I don't think like neither Tropic or Vedic do the job fully, but that's also, I guess, why some people are reading these charts in so many different ways. There's even from what I believe, and astrologers can correct me. I'm cool with that, you know. From what I've realized, there's also different ways of how houses are placed in terms of like the degrees they land on. So there's different systems for that amongst also Vedic and tropical. So yeah, I was in general surprised that some aspects like Earth is very much absent in my chart, but a lot of people started telling me like, no, you feel very grounded and earthy, and I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? I'm mostly fire with like, you know, sun and water, and everything else is just air. But when I read in terms of like the zodiac signs that apply to these certain houses, that's when shit really clicked for me personally. That's when I was like, "Oh my God, it makes so much sense when you look at how the planets relate to these certain constellations that are in certain, you know, aspects of houses. Degrees, I don't look into that. I think that's too small and nitpicky for me. It's too much detail. I don't think it's completely worthless to look into that. There's a really cool site. I don't know if I'll find it ever again. It must be somewhere on one of my servers, somewhere. But there was a site where you could read every single degrees for every single different sign, and depending on who you were, where you landed, you would have a different, you know, little excerpt, a spiritual description slash just writing of some sort that you could then read into and divinate yourself. But really, it was like philosophy slash poems that are of spiritual nature for that specific degree because someone actually channeled that. So, but it actually worked out decent. And I think when you're going into the specifics of astrology, you're never really going to hit the nail of that on the head. I think trying to attach it to a specific science or system that is like completely quantifiable and there's no way of like missing the marker or whatever, right, is useless in a way because it's the same as you even as a really good card reader that actually does do premonitions, like you actually divine the future and it happens, right? Even then, that is always a roll of the dice because it depends on so many different factors, and anything you divine can change or shift. Some things are more set than others, but at the end of the day, I think there's something being lost in the practice of astrology when it's being very heavily dug into in the point of like, I want a specific result. I want a specific answer. I want this to click like a mathematical little game cube of premonitions and programming and facts. And energy and spirituality is not like that. The point of how we use astrology as a tool is it has so much vastness to it that we haven't explored yet because it depends off of not just us, but it depends off of the divinator reader and then the querent, all right, the person that's getting the astrology reading. And I don't really want to discourage anyone from digging into astrology. Go frickin' crazy, like, or don't, whichever is better for your mental health. But like, it can become a guessing game that you never really get results from, and I believe that it needs to evolve, as I already said. I think that the way we use astrology maybe was more relevant and accurate back in the day when it was more popular, right? But now we have shifted civilization to such a huge extent from then. So much has happened energetically. So much is being unraveled and changed currently energetically that really like astrology just as much as anything else is in need of like a revision and an evolution. And I think anyone and everyone that does astrology is participating in that. And some people are really good at getting specifics. I'm not gonna say that you can't divine the future or guess something of people's aspects, but um, I think personally I've just seen people really get lost and over attached about it, and then I think also a really important detail is like if you're applying this to people, right? How do you do that? Because it's more important about how you're actually treating your clients or how you're having a conversation about these aspects that are personal to them and important, and they feel charged about it, right? How are you tending to their journey? How are you guiding them with this tool? Because it's really important to not make them feel overwhelmed, not give them false truths, because you can give a lot of false truths in astrology, especially if you're like just constantly ramped up on questions and ideas and points and trying to figure out the universe and like literally make facts out of it. A person that's receiving this one might get like a lot of useless information that's not relevant for them. They can get emotionally agitated. They can get taken onto a different alignment in their astrology that isn't actually for their highest good. And like, because some aspects really don't translate the same from one individual to another, even if it's like Chiron, Lilith, or like really heavy placements of trauma-based or karmic like resolution and healing and transformation, right? Some people really don't go through the same stuff and others do, but the way you communicate is a skill that goes beyond astrology in every sense. Whatever you do with people, right? Like there's that saying of like do and speak everything with kindness, and that's for a reason because as psychics and practitioners, we have an impact. Like we all really do have an impact, and people that are going for you to guidance, uh, to get some clarity, it's important to not get them just as riled up in the guessing game as you are, and to give them communication and experience that actually helps them in their path instead of saying, here's are all the things that your chart equals to, because none of that might actually apply to them. If you don't know how to divinate the chart to the person, or if you don't know how to divinate even the current astrological transitions to that specific individual, right? You might just be fucking them over because they're gonna get well, lost, anxious, or overly attached to something that isn't even a part of their lives, just because it's written in the stars doesn't mean you know it for a fact, right? And it's good if you can mention the future for them about something, but it's important to not make everything about it. So yeah, I believe in astrology in the sense of it's kind of like a weather map energetically. in many ways, right? You can divinate astrology not just for individuals, but you can do it for the planet, you can do it for the collective, for a country, for a situation. You can do it for anything. It's really quite vast in how you can interpret questions and what charts you can pull from the many sites and browsers we have for it now. But at the same time, I think it's important to, always take it with a grain of salt if you're personally tuning into that and know that it's going to apply to you uniquely. Uh, and you can see that in every retrograde and every anything, right? There's multiple different experiences, different groups of people going through different vibes of it. And some people might be just having a vacation while everyone's burning, really. And they're like, I don't know. But then a few years later, right, they actually feel that retrograde more than anyone else. And it's so vastly different from anyone and anyone. And we aren't completely uh, defined by our charts or what's happening in, I guess, the collective, even astrologically. At the end of the day, it depends off of our soul and energy, and it's more like, as I said, a map. So you could apply it as like if you have, your chart, you see your aspects, you see what is influenced by what. You still need to apply it to yourself individually, personally, in a way that makes sense to you and really matters and connects to what you wanna figure out or understand. And sometimes it takes years to dig into just one placement to figure out how it actually applies to you. Other times it's like that, like you're reading your chart and you understand everything, that whole entire like paragraph of what you're looking at. It's just like illuminating your whole entire experience, right? But other times it is a case of digging, learning, not overly attaching as well, because it's not just a weather map for me as well as it's a timing map. So personally, as an individual, it's kind of like, let's say you have a map in a video game, right? And you see the layout of the map. You see how many rooms there are, you see what structures are out there, and you see where you are at, but there's also a fog through which you can't see who is where else. You can't see what is in the rooms, right? Fog of war, as it's called in games. And you just know that these are where the rooms are, but by the time that you get to that room, anything could have happened. Um, it's kind of the same in astrology. You don't know exactly what's happening with that placement at that time, but you know that something's going to happen at that time. When you get to that placement, when time goes in the stars, right? When the current day chart aligns with your chart in this way, that's what it's gonna signify or could mean, but potentially it's just like this is where the time starts unlocking a certain type of energy within your life. And it's going to be different for everyone because stars and constellations relate to us differently. We're also a different expression of them, of the stars. We are also connected to these planets in a different way, all of us, right? Not just through the signs that astrology shows us about what's conjunct or trine or square where or sextile, right? Or how, I don't know, you were born in a retrograde now, and this retrograde 20 years later is going to affect you, but more also in the case of like energetically as conscious beings, because celestial bodies have a consciousness, they have a frequency of their own. We relate to that frequency different. We relate to that awareness, that consciousness completely different than any other person. And so we're also a different expression of these different placements that we can find in our chart. And I think hearing this, we can all hear why astrology is damn fucking complicated and it's so hard to tie it down. But some people have more luck with it than others. Some people study it for 13, 15 years and they can't guess or divinate shit. But they still go at it, they still do it, and sometimes, they read some good stuff. Others take it up, and in the next 2, 3 years, they're giving out weather forecasts for like all of the upcoming years, for the five next maybe 10 years of like what they can see in the stars, and it is actually accurate. They describe it in multiple different ways for multiple collectives. They describe the vagueness of certain energy that could be around people's experiences, homes, just like, certain areas. But they also leave room for openness, as I've noticed. They leave it to be like, you got to participate. You can't just take this for verbatim. And depending on where you are in your journey, all of this is going to change, right? Like we are such a huge determining factor in how life goes and where it flows and how we experience it, and especially even with what we were born with, what we have inherently in us. It's all subject to change depending on how we view it and how we go and flow with it. So yeah, honestly, I don't have too much to mention about astrology because I've still to get there, I guess, in terms of practices. Like it's something I'm still looking forward to participating and doing. I don't want to get into it too much because it is time consuming and complicated, and I don't know, I think I would only really read a chart for a person that would quite quite need it, and I was personally intrigued in their stars. Yeah, you can also communicate through your intuition with these different celestial bodies, planets, constellations even. You might actually find home in some of them. And stars, don't give us messages just in terms of charts. So even if you don't look into astrology, don't read charts, don't give a shit about it, right? It doesn't mean that it's not happening to you. And some people are more prone to certain experiences than others, especially if you're sensitive and a psychic. Don't be surprised if something's happening in the sky and you literally can't sleep or are losing your shit out of nowhere. That's some people are just like more, prone to it, more susceptible to it. But when you're stargazing, there's a lot of momentary alignment that you can divinate for yourself and really channel and tune into for yourself personally. Besides like moon gazing and sun gazing, do that one with security. Um, Besides all of those things, you just seeing certain bodies in the sky at certain times when you're thinking of something or going through something is your own personal sign about maybe some planet affecting you or this period of times meaning something for you. I have noticed through my experience, and I believe through others as well, that when there's a certain body in the sky and you're going through some mad shit, it's because of that thing in the sky. It's in your sky. It usually starts around the time you start seeing it, or it's somewhere around you, right? And you're just not paying attention to it. If you see like, I don't know, Saturn, Venus, Mars, whatever in the sky, and you keep seeing it and at these certain intervals for like, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks, something like that, right? It might just be speaking to you in terms of a sign of like something is happening. This is the time. This is the time for this. And this is how you're experiencing it. But yeah, don't get attached to whatever an astrologer tells you about what they read in or of the stars. Unless they're really damn good, then you might need to consider some things. But even then, you are always in your own power of what happens, and if you feel like you're going crazy or overburdened with something, don't pay attention to it, don't mind it, just let it go. Find your own personal connection, relation, and understanding with any practice and any experience or thing. And if you're a astrologer, please don't make people go crazy over their placements or charts or start trying to figure them out by applying a bunch of vague ideas about how their placement translates to their actual personal experience, depending, right, like regardless of what it is, even if you're trying to help them, it might do more harm than positive cause. And it's important to understand that you're not just learning about what placements mean in astrology and what happens because of them or with them. You're also learning how to I need to figure this out, but we're moving on. It'll change when I actually set up my boom mic. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily be listing off all of these things or ideas or trying to factually figure out what placements mean what to people. It's way more useful figuring out how to divinate and relate that in a healthy, holistic, happy way for people to actually have use from and heal and gain from in that, right? So it's learning more about divination, how to apply it to real means, to practical means, or to people, not just what does this mean in stars or in astrology or in placements or whatever. Like it's kind of like reading cards. I guess example would be anyone can read cards as long as you tune into your intuition and you just like actually have confidence with that and trust it over the course of time. You're always going to expand on your understanding of the cards, but if you won't ever start going by your intuition and really leaning into the practice of it and what it means, right, you might miss the whole experience of like how to personally divinate and how you use that tool and what it means and how to make it work in the best way possible for you and other people, because you don't really need to factually know all of the cards and just go off of the card meanings. It's all magic and psychic abilities and gifts and abilities that you are honing and learning over time. It's about you and the experience you provide and the light and love that comes from that rather than learning something as a skill like a sport or like a definite job, right? Or a definite mathematical equation or definite physics or definite chemistry. Spirituality is so elusive and flowing and shapeless that it's a lot more of the heart and personal, and it really matters how we connect these abilities, understandings, knowledge, sacred tools, and spaces for growth and development instead of like trying to tie it down to what we think it is, what we believe it is, or some ideas and proving them. It misses the boat and it can cause harm. So. I think that was just my personal spiel that I really wanted to share and say. And it's more fun in general if you go into divination being like, let's be free about it and explore and learn and study in a way that actually like constitutes, fun and development and growth and vibes instead of like because it does really in a way feed into like how can I prove spirituality a lot of the time. There's many other reasons of how and why people try and factually base astrology, but um from what I've noticed most of the time it is kind of like I want to prove this. I want to figure out what no one's been able to figure it out about, and it's like, well, maybe we haven't experienced it the way we needed to. Maybe we're still learning and figuring it out. Maybe we're unlocking all of these different practices and ideas, right? Because we definitely are getting out of a lot of limitation, personal and otherwise. And I think that will open us up to more clarity, understanding about what is out there and what it means and what the fuck to do with it, right? So. Uh, yeah, we'll see where this goes next time. It was just 3333 on my recording clock. I will leave you here, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, although it was just me rambling about my personal experience of astrology. And yeah, we'll see if a part two comes from this. Um, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for the support. It's very nice of you. Thank you. I will see you next time, and feel free to check out the link tree or, leave a comment, share your story, whatever. It's cool. Peace.